Okay, so I hope everyone enjoyed all those presentations. Maybe slightly longer than anticipated because everyone here is very passionate about Complete Streets, about our streets, and I'm sure everyone else out here is too. So we are going to get started with our panel discussion and question and answer period. We'll try to stick to about 15 minutes so we can get back on time. And our moderator for the evening is Ryan McGrill from Raise the Hammer. So I will ask him to come up now and start taking your questions.
Thank you all. Oh, am I on here? Okay. Nicholas Keplahan, who I think is in here somewhere, is a longtime Raise the Hammer contributor. And years ago, he coined the term amateur urbanist. And I just love that, and I proudly call myself an amateur urbanist. But we're very fortunate to have a panel of professionals here, professional urbanists, professional transportation planners, professional engineers, and I'm very excited that we have the opportunity to pick their brains a little bit. So we've got, like Maria said, we've got about 15 minutes or so. After that, we can kind of play it by ear. Maybe I can check in and see if people want to call it a night or kind of take one or two more questions. But so we will open the floor to questions. If I can just ask people, respect everybody's time. A lot of people have come out tonight. It's fantastic. Make sure your questions are actually questions and not like manifestos, try to focus on really kind of tapping into the expertise we have here so that as citizens we can take more out of this and we can go out into our communities and make more of these kinds of things happen. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, one close to the back here.
Hi. Thanks everyone for the good presentations. There was a lot of talk about the upcoming Transportation Master Plan review. Can you just speak a little bit more about the process and how people can get involved?
Computer engineer, but I don't know how to use these things. Hello? Yeah, so it's just starting. The process is just getting kicked off actually this week with staff. And there will be public engagement sessions, traditional ones. There'll be online engagement as well through various tools and social media. So it's going to be a little different than 2007 where we had a few PICs or, following traditional sort of scope of the TMP. And we're going to get hopefully into where people are. We want to be where people are rather than where we want them to come to. And partially, we had a complete street sort of engagement. This is sort of leading up. We had 3 or 4 sessions like this one as well, trying to lead up and gather your ideas. We want to get people's ideas on the back wall here, and we want to help integrate that into how we engage the public during the Transportation Master Plan period. So right now, we're just getting kicked off, but there will be opportunities to comment on all the different aspects, because obviously, I've never been able to read the whole thing. And I literally work in the department in which created the TMP in the first place. So, I don't know if that's good or bad, don't quote me. So, I think that what's important too is that we want to get something more readable to the public. So yeah, we're going to have, there'll be this much paper, right? Don't print it, it's back in the environment. But we want to get out something that's also really summarize the document very well and very concisely. So we are working on that. We want to engage people on how do they want to get this information because it's so much. So there'll be a lot of various ways for input and then various ways to how do we disseminate the information. We don't want it to just sit on the floor collecting dust.
Yes, question from here.
A general dimensional question to anyone in the panel. There's some talk that some of the drive lanes were narrowed down. What would constitute the minimum or the minimum dimension for a traveled lane for a roadway in order to provide excess room to put bike lanes in?
Every municipality has its own standard, but as a start, what Toronto has recently come out with was they said that their minimum is now going to be 3 meters, which someone else astutely pointed out is actually the very old standard, 10 feet. So it's kind of going back, it's sort of things are kind of coming full circle, where our minimums kind of increased. So the minimums went up to, and this is getting very wonkish technical, I apologize, but, a lot of places were at 3.35 meters. Where they came up with that number, I don't really know. But in urban settings, 3 meters is perfectly appropriate. And again, the narrower the lane, the more the signal to the driver that speeding is a less comfortable option. So narrowing is one of the most effective ways to calm traffic and to slow traffic. So 3 meters is perfectly appropriate in an urban setting. So that's what Toronto is going back to. And I think that's something that probably in the Transportation Master Plan update, that would be a good piece of feedback to be hearing from the community, is to say that, you know, this 3 meter standard is perfectly appropriate in an urban setting like Hamilton.
I think it's also important just to kind of weigh in on how you talk about what narrowing the lane does. Because when people hear it's going to slow traffic, they hear it's going to add time to my commute. What we need to kind of switch our language to is it's going to rationalize how traffic moves. It's going to create less unpredictability, it's going to create more stability, and for the average driver, the person that's not speeding or driving aggressively, it's either going to leave your commute time about the same, or it's going to improve it, because unpredictability is the thing that slows traffic down. So it actually will rationalize and in some cases improve how traffic moves. So it's just a language thing, but so important when you talk about slowing traffic, everyone gets up in arms. When you talk about normalizing how traffic moves, people are okay with it.
We also talk about reducing dangerous speeding as opposed to slowing traffic. Question from the front here? Oh, right, very front. Yep.
I come across the city regularly on bicycle from Stony Creek, about 15 kilometers. Almost all the streets between here and there have been repaved in the last 2 to 3 years. I haven't seen any changes in those streets as a result, except that they've got new pavement on them. When is that complete streets policy going to start being implemented, and what's it going to look like in those residential neighborhoods?
The City of Hamilton doesn't have a complete streets policy right now. They have sort of components of it. So the cycling master plan. So basically, if those streets were not on the cycling master plan, basically the city does not plan to put cycling facilities on them. And that's what would change. That's one of the things that would change with the complete streets policy, is that there wouldn't be, every street could have a cycling facility if it was context appropriate. Not every street needs it, but it wouldn't be something that's set 5 years in advance. It could be looked at every year. Okay, we're repaving this. How safe is it for cyclists? Oh, it's changed. Okay, we're going to add a cycling facility. So the reason why there hasn't been is changes that you expect is that there's been, you know, as Pete said, kind of ad hoc changes, but there hasn't been that policy level change in terms of complete streets. The one big change, though, has been the adoption of the pedestrian master plan, which got adopted around this time last year, pedestrian mobility master plan. And that one does have quite a bit of teeth. Well, it doesn't really have teeth because it doesn't talk about exceptions, but it has, it kind of says you should do all this stuff, but it doesn't talk about, well, what if you can't do this stuff? How does that get decided? But the pedestrian, but that's so new, so it hasn't really, we haven't seen the implementation of it yet. So yeah, we're not there yet, and that's why we need to take the momentum from tonight and continue it into the transportation master plan and make sure that it becomes stronger.
Do you have any questions maybe from the back or from the sides? Oh, someone in the back corner here. Yes.
I'm kind of a detail-oriented person, so I was wondering if, is there any data on how the weather affects bike usage? I'm thinking more like October to March. And then secondly, we talked about the chip in the bike. Is there data, and I guess I'd like to know Montreal, because when I saw what was up there, I was trying to think of something more like the weather in Hamilton, and Montreal is probably the best fit for that. Does the chip track data on like the dates and times these bikes are used? And do we have any data? Because we don't have any here. Do we have it elsewhere?
Okay, I'm from Montreal, so I want to answer this question. I mean, I've been here for 10, 12 years, but until I came here, I had never left Montreal for more than a month.
And in Montreal, it has similar weather, it has worse weather. I mean, here it's banana belt in terms of snow. The snow there is terrible. And for many years, they closed the bike lanes from November 1st to April 1st. And then they've started to realize, hey, you know what? Actually, there's lots more people who are still cycling way past that time. And so now they have this white bike lanes, they call them, that they clear the snow and keep all year round. There's obviously cycling is to a certain extent weather dependent, but I still see lots of cyclists in mild winter weather. There was a year that I cycled the whole winter. It's one of those perverse, horrible climate change things. We don't want the climate to get warmer, but when it is getting warmer, and it does help cycling, winter cycling. And the second part of the question was about bike share and the chips and the data. The technology is so new that only this week, in fact, in Phoenix and Tampa, I believe, 2 systems got launched from the same technology, and so just this week is that technology in widespread use. So there is data from Hoboken from last year. You can talk to the bike share people, would be great.
Just to speak on their behalf a little bit, like you asked about what will the bikes, what data will they collect? They will collect data. They won't collect the weather data, but we overlay the weather data, and we know the time of day, location, and where people have actually cycled, the route that they've cycled. So we can overlay weather data on top of the bike share user data. So I think that's will be a very important tool actually. And we also have an AT counts page, so we are counting right now on the streets. We have specialized counters, and we're bringing in more specialized counters. And we do track weather data and cycling data on routes, and also we track pedestrian data. We track data at the stairs, who's using the stairs, who's using the trails, not who particularly, but in terms of numbers. So we are collecting that data as we speak. The bike share data will complement that.
Just one word about winter. The winter does come up. Like, why should we build bike lanes? They don't get used all year. Why should we do that just for 6 months of the year? We built, I believe, a twin pad arena that gets used how many times a year? And we have many cycling winter facilities that are just winter, and we still spend money on them. It's important, and they have importance, and so do cycling facilities.
I would just add, anecdotally, last week when we had some snow in Hamilton, I took a few photographs of the bike lanes with a fresh dusting of snow on them, and they were absolutely riddled with cycle tracks. Obviously cyclists are using them. Not as many, but there is still some who will ride almost anybody.
I think, so the data that I could speak to, I think, comes from a couple of American cities that have prioritized winter cycling, particularly Minneapolis and Madison, Wisconsin. So again, these are places that have worse winters than we have here. And they typically see about 40% of their kind of peak summer usage continue to ride through the winter. And primarily in those cities, it's because they clear priority routes with the same priority that they would clear priority car routes. I think that it's important to emphasize that you really do get the transportation system you plan for. If we didn't get out and plow the roads, I don't think a whole lot of people would be, driving their little compacts around in winter as well. Everyone would probably have, great big trucks or Hummers or, in some places, in some winters, like last year, tanks might be best. But, we get the transportation system we plan for, and if you make it accessible for people to ride and it's predictable, and that's what's so important, is that it needs to be predictably done. Then you see that people start to take the initiative to continue riding all year round. You're never going to see the same ridership that you see in the summer months, but we can see half that ridership, and I think that would be a success as far as the investment that we're making in it.
We have time for one more question. Are there any questions from over here? We haven't had any from this side of the room yet. No? Okay. Oh, okay. Here we go.
There's one at the back too. He had his hand up like the whole time.
Hey, I'm just wondering if there's any plans to. I noticed on the map that none of the hubs for the bike shares were up the mountain. And I'm wondering if there's any plans to expand it up the mountain, and also if there's any plans to make accessibility between the mountain and downtown easier for bikes.
Sorry, could you comment on the east end as well, please? If that's okay.
Okay, so first of all, the bike share people are Sean and Chelsea right there. So hi, Sean and Chelsea. The bikes are our first ever Hamilton bike's actually right here. That's an active bike, first one in the network. There are 5 mountain escarpment stations, 4 on Concession Street and 1 in front of Mohawk College. So they're our first foray onto the escarpment, and they're just the beginning. And we're testing to see how well they will be used up there in sort of a, Concession Street's next to Ottawa Street, or just like I think there's a lot going on there, and that can really, with the dense streets, right, compact urban form, I think that it can support cycling, actually a lot of cycling especially with bike share. So that said, you can see on the map there's 2 areas of expansion. The one is going to be to the east, and you see as we're building, we want to build the east, and we want to go all the way to Ottawa Street. So you see it's trying to reach out there if you look at the map, and it's also trying to reach up on the map. So there's 2. Those are our obvious next places to go. And as soon as we get some real good data and actual bikes on the street, we can start about looking at the expansion plans from there. Peter, can I just?
So just because I'm also a data guy too, when you take a look at bike share systems across North America, I read a really good article the other day, and one of the kind of experts in this field has said it's better to have a system that's dense and compact and functioning really well, and have people demanding it expand, than to have a system that's too spread out and isn't doing its job and then just fails. So we need to see bike share up on the mountain, we need to see it in the East End, but we need to see it succeed first. And the number one thing that makes bike share, that determines whether or not a bike share succeeds, is density of stations and availability of bikes. Nothing else matters as much as that when you take a look at the successful bike share schemes. So please, please be patient. Because if we try and push it too hard, too far, too fast, and spread it out too thin, it will fail. If we grow it organically, then we can have the best bike share system in Canada.
Okay, so it's 9:05 right now. Do we want to take a couple more questions, or does everyone want to get out of here? I think we can probably push it just a little bit, but I don't want to try people's patience if people are ready to wrap it up at this point. Show of hands if you want to take a couple more questions. Okay, so I hope not all of you have a question, because maybe we can. Sure, you have a question.
My question is, how can we improve the level of design engineering competence in city staff? And maybe Matt can comment on this. Let me give a couple of examples of what I would call design engineering incompetence. Well, one that we already saw up here was the proposal on Herkimer, that door zone bike lanes, where the bike lane is the most dangerous place on the entire road to ride your bike.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop you there. There's lots of examples, but let's get straight to the question.
Sure. And, well, the question is, what can we do to improve the level of design engineering competence? Hunter Street's another one. Now, these violate design engineering standards, the benchmark being the Dutch Crow standard. We don't see that for cars. You don't see amateur engineers saying, hey, those city staff plans to build that bridge for cars, it's going to fall down. How do we make that better?
So I'm going to field this one because I don't want Pete or Matt to have to, because they're city staff. But I just work with a lot of city staff. So the main way that we do this is we educate ourselves a little bit better around what the standards are now. And you know, I think it's really important, to your point, to note that actually, and this is getting a little techie and wonky, up until 2014, we actually didn't have a bikeway design standard that was really anywhere near up to date here in Ontario. And so while there were other design standards in North America and across the world, like the Crow standards, like you mentioned, those weren't necessarily approved by the Professional Engineers of Ontario or by kind of North American standards. And so if someone went out on a limb and decided, I'm going to design something according to Crow standards, and something happened and it was found that they weren't using what was in the design guidelines, they could be held liable. And people are very risk averse when it comes to this, and we need to understand that this is an incremental change. And we recognize, I think, that there are better standards out there than what we're using. Book 18, you know, I mean, if you take a look, it's the cycling design standards now for Ontario. It's a great manual if you look at the best practices. If you look at the lowest practices, then you end up with crappy infrastructure. But, you know, we didn't have these a year ago, even. If we would have been sitting here talking, we didn't have these a year ago. So, you know, it really is incremental change. And, you know, I think a lot of it too, every time I kind of go and I listen to young traffic engineers, it's always entertaining because I always think they don't want to build the kind of stuff that's getting built right now. And so, you know, I think in 20 years, they're going to have a hard time. It's going to be impossible to find someone that wants to build, you know, a road that looks anything remotely like Cannon Street used to. So that's kind of my answer to it. And I think that, okay.
You want it. I've already said so much, why stop now? I think that one other piece to this is that we've got great policy. We're going to build some great policy. The TMP, let's say it's the most amazing policy that we've ever developed. You know, you've got to get that policy into action, and one way that is design guides. And you know, our design guides we've done a few updates to them over time, but I think look at Calgary, their design guides are called their Complete Streets Design Guidelines. So it's not that we don't have people who have technical ability. We have very good people who can build different street elements very well, but do we have the right guidelines in place that implement the policies that we're working on? So I think that's one thing that we really want to focus on in the near future is, okay, let's take a look at all this great stuff that we engage the public with and we all believe in and the council has approved, and get that into the practitioners' hands who are actually going to design the streets and say these are the new guidelines, because essentially we're following what our guidelines are how to implement our policy. If they're old, our policy is new. It doesn't matter how new our policy is. We've got to get those guidelines up to date as well. And that's what we're going to work on. That's what we are working on right now, but we need to, obviously, that's going to be informed by our new policies. And remember, our new OP was just approved. So, TDM, OP. So, yes, our OP just got approved. We're going to update the zoning bylaw because of that new OP. We've got our TMP, so everything is following that official plan approval. So, and then that's going to, it takes time, but that's going to get into our design guidelines. And that's when we're going to see this implemented full stream, just like you see what's implemented right now on the street today, based on our older design guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, in the front of the question.
Yes, sure.
I think this is the last one.
Okay, my question goes back a bit to winter cycling and then looking at changing the way that we approach infrastructure and looking at maybe even the cleaning of streets. And my question is really about when the wintertime comes and we've got snow and everything in bike lanes, is there a look in the city of Hamilton to changing the priority of snow clearing and things like that? Is that being considered? Because I know that if we have areas regularly cleared or something, as you were saying, predictability is helpful in terms of getting people out there cycling even in the more difficult months.
Toronto has a policy, a clear policy, public, and like the first thing that they clear is contraflow bike lanes. They have quite a few. We only have one in Hamilton. King Street, yes, true. And well, Canada's not contraflow. Never mind. And Hamilton doesn't really. Hamilton has a policy for Cannon Street, but doesn't have for the others. It's kind of like if we have time, if we have money, and so really, it's the kind of thing where we should all be writing. Anyone who anything. This is like one of my #1 things is learn this email address by heart and use it all the time. Once a week, send some email to askcity@hamilton.ca. The very nice customer service people there will forward your request. And yes, it might not always get done, but I'm actually quite surprised at how many things get done when I just email Ask City. You know, when you see like a pedestrian light facing the wrong way, or you know, a street light out, or yeah, they're not. I cycled and I couldn't cycle because of that. They record these. They number of complaints makes a difference, so we have to complain, we have to be vocal.
I think it goes to, again, it's one of those things that's evolving, getting out of silos. So I think the way things have been done traditionally is that one department will do something and then everyone else has to catch up kind of after the fact, and there's not a lot of intercommunication that goes on. And that's not to say that that's reflective of the situation now, but I think that's the sort of thing that's changing, and Canada's a great example of that, where the winter maintenance piece was built right into the proposal to build the Canada Street cycle track. Whereas in other projects, that sort of thing is, again, it gets considered, but it's not integrated holistically, and I think we're moving now towards more of a process where everything is considered holistically. So actually being conscious of the fact that yes, you have to set aside budget for better snow clearing equipment, more staff to go out and do it, prioritizing routes, all these different things which may not have been considered in the past when looking at building a cycling network. But again, with the latest example of Cannon Street, where that was considered, that's the step forward. And it's, as Justin said, sort of, that we have that now, so leveraging that and moving forward with it and trying to make sure that everything going forward from now follows that same standard.
All right, thank you all very much for coming out. It's exciting to see. Oh, okay, one more last
Mary's
final
done
question.
so much work in Crown Point that you get to ask. Okay, here's the one question. Did you get instrumental in a lot of changes? No. Did you get? No. Okay. Did you get pushback from the trucking industry when you made Cannon Street work? If you did,
Pushback from the trucking industry. Was there pushback from the trucking industry?
Not formally, which is good, because they didn't come out like the Ontario Trucking Authority didn't come out like saying anything against it, and actually the Ontario Trucking Authority is really starting to kind of understand a little bit more about the importance of cycling safety and of these kind of protected infrastructure. And I think a lot of it with the trucking industry was just a matter of telling them, you know, there's tons of capacity on that road. Let's show you the data. It's a pilot project. Pilot projects are huge, by the way. The two favorite words in any active transportation advocate's toolkit should be pilot project, because people are way more likely to support something if they think they can take it out. You know, they're going to take Cannon Street from our cold, dead hands if they try and work it out there. You think the community's going to let them take that out in 3 years? Are you kidding me? That thing is there permanently. I can almost guarantee it. When they see the metrics coming back from it, there's no way they're taking it out. But that's how you have to do it. You can't estimate how something's going to work unless you just do it. So pilot projects, and that helped with the trucking industry a lot.
And let me just say, there's a lot of unusual partners. So truckers, you know, you can make the argument of like, look, wouldn't you rather have the cyclists in a dedicated lane and not sharing your lane? And most truckers would agree with that. And then the CAA is an interesting partner. They're actually quite pro-active infrastructure and cycling infrastructure. I don't quite get it why exactly.
You tell me why. Okay, good.
I'll tell you why. The CAA, sorry, full disclosure, I work for the Shared Road Cycling Coalition. The CAA is a major partner of ours. They're a major sponsor. And the reason why they're so pro-active transportation is because they can read the writing on the wall. And they can recognize the fact that, again, unless you start getting rid of things like sidewalks and buildings, you're not going to be able to move more cars. You need to be able to focus on how you move more people. And they recognize that there's a value proposition to their membership if people are safer on the roads and if the roads are safer for all road users. They see the data. They're smart people. They recognize that multimodal complete streets are safer for everyone. They provide insurance. Fewer collisions means fewer payouts, means better bottom line for them. So they want to make sure that the roads are as safe as they can be for all road users. That's at the end of the day, that's why the CAA is such an amazing partner to active transportation and such an unexpected one.
And I think also, there's a fixed number of people in the city, right? Whatever the number is, 500,000 or whatever, how many people come in and out. It's pretty, you know, yes, it's growing, but there's only so much road space. We know we can't expand the roads that much. By shifting modes, we are freeing up road space, and it isn't It isn't a selling point. It's not a sale. I'm not a salesman tactic. It's real. Like these policies are not necessarily anti-car because we're actually making traffic better for all. Traffic better and transportation better. Both things are happening at once, and every city who's done this kind of pioneering work can show that car movements improve. And I think the goods movement industry understands this point as well. It does, from at least a higher level, that if we want to move goods, we're going to have to do something else to shift auto traffic in different directions, whether that be in carpool lanes and HOV lanes, whether it be on transit and GO Transit or local transit. If we don't do that, we're gonna, in the next 10 to 15 years, we're from a goods movement perspective, we're in big trouble. And I think everyone understands that together. So there's a lot of good work going on. The urban, I work in a lot of the urban environment, and the people, highway environment, and all these people are coming together to say, okay, well, we have a larger problem here in the next 15 years. How are we going to fix that problem? And Metrolinx picked up a lot of that in the big move. And as much as that's another policy document that, sometimes if you're a policy geek, it's fascinating. If you're not, you don't want to read it. But there's a lot of great things that talk about that multimodal integration. So we haven't lost that point. I think it's very important.
Okay, so apologies for stopping the Q&A session short. Our speakers and moderator, I believe, are still going to hang out around, so you can still ask them lots of questions. So please feel free to talk to them one-on-one. A few final points before you get out of your seats and I lose your attention. We have a transportation showcase in the background here, and it's great that people have already put their comments here, but please, if you have any suggestions, tips, anything that came out here that you really want the city to know about, all of that information will be tracked in the Transportation Showcase report, and Risha, who should really put her hand up, she created that showcase, and she's going to do the work to put all the information together. We've had it at a couple of events so far, so thank you to her for doing that. So please, we want to capture your input.
She'll also take your email address if you want to get involved in TMP. Someone asked me that question, and we're actually taking email addresses if you want to get further engaged in that process.
And also send out my email addresses and take my fact sheets.
So get their contacts before you leave tonight. Another quick thing too, you'll note the first Sobe bike is in front of us here. So if you didn't notice it before, it is actually sitting right in front here. And the Sobe people are here to take all of your questions as well in the back. So feel free to talk to them. It's exciting that it's coming to Hamilton, and if you have any burning questions to ask, go ahead and ask them. Next, upcoming event. So I mentioned that this is the first ever CLS event that we've put on, but we do have additional ones already booked. So if you want to go to the next slide back there. We have one, next slide. There we go.
I got it.
January 15th, Cleaning Green, Fact or Greenwashing. February 25th, Green Buildings, Resource Conservation and Urban Regeneration. And then future events as well. There will be about 5 more or so in the new year. So we're really excited about them. And finally, to thank everyone, because I can't let you go until I thank everyone who had a part in all of this. So the CLS organizing team, thank you to all of them, and everyone who's involved in really putting this together. I probably missed some people, so I apologize if the logo's not up there, but the SPN, Sustainable Hamilton, Office Max Grand and Toy, Forward with Integrity, McMaster Student Success Center, McMaster's Committee on the Minor in Sustainability, Max Academic Sustainability Program Office at Mohawk College, as well as the AGH for providing this incredible venue for us. How perfect a setting to kick off our first event. There was also a generous financial contribution made by a private donor and financial support from Smart Community Hamilton. And if you want to know more about Smart Community Hamilton, there's some information over there. And finally, put some comments on that map and tell us why you love your streets. I think we all have great stories about why we love them, why we don't. So share them here, share them on Twitter, share them with us after. We will also be sending out a survey to everyone who registered through the Eventbrite or who gave their email out today. So you will have a survey to tell us what you liked or didn't like, or anything about this event, and suggest future ideas for us. We love feedback. I think that's the important part about everything that we do. I probably missed something that I was supposed to say, but either way, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Oh, right, food. food. There's lots of food left, so go eat before you go